Hey, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Mission Matters. My name is Adam Torres, and if you'd like to apply to be a guest on the show, just head on over to missionmatters.com and click on Be Our Guest to Apply. All right, so today I have on Simeon Bochev, and he is the CEO and co-founder over at Compute Exchange, and this interview is part of our Milken series, our Milken Conference Global series, where we're talking to and for attendees, speakers, panelists, and other individuals that attended the Milken Global Conference in Beverly Hills, California. And first thing first, Simeon, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here, Adam. Thanks for having me.
All right. So, of course, I want to get into more of what you're doing over at Compute Exchange and also go talk about your journey from Apple to AI and what you're doing at Compute Exchange. But first thing first, Milken Global Conference. So I understand that you spoke at the conference. Is that right?
That's right. So the Milken Global Conference happened in LA, I think about a month ago now, and I was asked to speak in a private session about the growth of AI infrastructure and the strain that that's going to put not just on our energy grid, where AI infrastructure is projected to grow to consume up to 12% of the U.S. energy grid in just the next few years, an increase from 4% last year, but also just there's a lot of talk about the tremendous amount of money being spent on infrastructure, $500 billion on this Stargate initiative announced by OpenAI, Oracle, and SoftBank. But then you hear hundreds of billions of dollars each from each of the hyperscalers. And, the audience there was looking to understand what's actually going on.
What were some of the key takeaways that were there? Obviously, everybody listening may not. I'm trying to give people that, behind the scenes of what took place and some of that info if they haven't had the privilege of attending or didn't catch your talk. What were some of the takeaways?
Definitely. And I'll say that, my personal mission, but also the mission of the Compute Exchange is to bring more transparency and openness around this entire computing infrastructure and computing economy piece. So very, very much in line with that. I would say the three main insights were, one, you can both have too much compute and not enough at the same time. We can unpack that more if you'd like, which is said more simply, there's still not enough capacity out there and we need to be investing more money, more than what's already been announced, in fact. Two, there is going to be a strain on our domestic national, but also international resources, from anything from semiconductor supply chains to power generation capacity to meet this demand to the high-skilled human labor necessary to build these large data centers and operate them. And then third is that we're still very early days, despite what some of the rhetoric online might be in the news. We're still very early days, and there's a long runway ahead of innovation and developments in AI and AI infrastructure ahead of us.
Have you been to the Milken Conference before? Or is this your first time? Have you attended before?
No, this is my first time. I believe I was invited to attend one of the regional conferences, but wasn't able to.
I love talking to first-time guests. I've been going now 3 years, going on 4 years, 3 or 4 years, I forget. I mean, it's one of my favorite times of the year. I just like it. It's my Super Bowl of conferences is what I call it. And some people I've heard call it like their Disneyland and I'm like, come on, Disneyland. But just because of the brain candy, like the different sessions, the people that are there, such as yourself, that are experts in their field that you can't always just, pop into a talk and, be educated in that manner. What was your thoughts? As a first-time attendee and speaker?
Well, maybe being a little lighthearted, I haven't seen as high of a bar tab limit at another conference as I did at Milken, but there are quite a few, I think, deep-pocketed individuals and companies there. But more seriously, I think the kinds of, as you say, brain trust or concentration of just pure knowledge and very deep, not just broad, but deep knowledge and expertise in areas was tremendous. And for me, it was a welcome change from most of the events that I go to, which are here in the Bay Area. And they're tech focused with a very, very smart group of people, but very different. I think the Milken lens was broader. There was more geopolitics there. There was also more around the investment economy and landscape. And I'll just briefly say, I was walking out after a session, and I just literally bumped into Eric Schmidt just walking around. And had a conversation as we walked to the next thing. And candidly, I was trying to get a meeting with him for a while, and then we just met.
Wow, that's amazing. And that does happen. And that's one of the conferences where something like that would happen. And that's why you notice how tight that security was, right? Like, that's one of the impressive things about that conference is that security. I'll tell you, you ain't getting in or near if you're not supposed to be there.
Yeah, I mean, I think there were several secretaries as well as heads of state, especially from the Middle East there. So
Yep.
it wasn't an easy experience to get in, but they did treat us speakers pretty well.
Absolutely. Let's get into your journey a little bit more. So what inspired you to shift from, AI, building AI infrastructure at Apple to compute and launching Compute Exchange? Like, how'd that take place?
Sure. If you'll permit a trip down memory lane just for 20 seconds, I actually had the privilege of kind of falling into AI back when I was 15 in 2005, when I was working on some early statistical models before, the Transformer paper was written back at Simeon National Labs. It's one of our nuclear research labs. But, if we fast forward, I think probably most interesting for your listeners is my time where I started the first AI research lab in Japan with a good friend of mine, and then transitioned that during COVID because I got stuck on the other side of the border closures here in the U.S. to Apple, where I was one of the folks leading in the AI infrastructure and platform team there. And we were some of the largest users of computing power in the world at that time. This is 2020 to 2023. And it's now public that, we work with AWS as well as other cloud providers. And I can tell you that having that front row seat to such large computing workload demands. I mean, we won't talk about what Siri is today, but Siri was the first at-scale AI product in the world. Over 300 million users, well before ChatGPT hit 100 million. And kind of getting to see that, I got excited but also frustrated by how inefficient and difficult it was to procure and then use compute. And I'm sure we'll talk about some of those issues. But to finish the journey, I got approached, funny enough, on LinkedIn by Lambda Labs, which is one of the leading neocloud providers. Folks I'm sure are familiar with CoreWeave that went public recently. And what was initially a sales call to try and convince Apple to work with Lambda turned into, I like to say, they got stuck with me instead.
Oh, that's funny.
I joined their team. Yeah.
That's awesome.
I mean, why did I join Lambda? Because I really believed in their mission of being, building for ML engineers by ML engineers, which you don't often see in the cloud provider space. And I thought that we could really disrupt the paradigm of the incumbents. And what I quickly learned is that some of those same structural issues I saw while at Apple were really, really hard for any individual company like Lambda to solve, which is why serendipity happened, kind of like running into Eric Schmidt. I got invited to a dinner with Don Wilson. Don Wilson is the founder of DRW, one of the largest commodity trading firms in the world. And at dinner, we talked about building a market for compute and how that could solve some of these structural issues. And Don's built multiple markets in his career. And after 2 months or so of talking about it, we decided to do it. And so that's what we've been doing since April of last year.
What an amazing story. And it's interesting how you connect the dots on that one. And I'd say when you think about the space that you're going to, like, how did you know the market was ready? And if you think about, like just the size, like could it surpass oil, all these different things. And how did you know that the market was ready, or is it ready, I should say?
Well, time will tell. I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing if I didn't have conviction that the time is right. You said something that I like to say is kind of provocative, but the oil and gas market is roughly $2 to $3 trillion per year, and at least in my life since 1990, I can't think of a single force that's led to more conflict as well as opportunity than oil and gas in the world, and that's a 2 to 3 trillion. Compute, we estimate, is already at $500 billion, if not more. And we easily expect it to surpass 10 trillion at steady state, especially if you believe that AI will become ubiquitous like the internet has become, and that you need computing infrastructure for AI to be at any sort of scale. And so it's a huge market opportunity, but right now there's nowhere that you can fungibly trade this as an asset. You're locked into long-term contracts as a user. A provider has to raise very expensive debt capital, and from limited options for debt capital raising, as well as costly equity issuances. Just look at CoreWeave and the amount of debt that they have, as well as the amount of equity they've had to issue to get to where they are, which is a very commendable place. And it's obvious that something's off. We can also talk about how for seemingly the same thing, let's call it an H100 GPU, one company might be charging 3 to 5 times what another company is charging, and they rightfully so might deserve to charge that. But it's next to impossible, even if you have, as I say, a PhD in AI infrastructure. By the way, that degree isn't offered anywhere. It's earned through, I think, hard work in the industry.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you know the industry, it's very hard to compare apples to apples, what these different providers are offering.
What's your next steps with Compute Exchange? Like as the market continues to, obviously the need is going to just continue to increase and increase, like the numbers are the numbers, but what's your next step? Like as you continue to scale this and do your work?
Well, I don't know if you allow repeat guests, but if possible, I'll have to come back because we're going to be announcing 2 major press releases in the coming 2 to 3 weeks. One is around the launch of a compute standards body that's going to work with some of the largest companies and most impactful companies in the AI industry to define the standards for how compute should be deployed. Because today, too many companies differentiate themselves just by granting you access to compute, as opposed to having access be open and ungated, and instead profiting off of the value add that they add on top. Think of the analogy of the internet. The internet had the open TCP/IP protocol, as well as certain technical standards like Ethernet that were agreed to by the main participants at the time. Compute is very much going in a different direction, and ultimately, I have conviction that hinders the adoption of AI. So that's one major initiative that we'll be announcing. And then the other one is really pushing for continued transparency in the market. We launched a pricing calculator on our site, which to my knowledge is the most transparent and trusted data set for compute in the world that shows folks exactly what the price should be, not what some provider lists on a website, but exactly what the trading price should be for a particular spec under certain conditions. And we're projecting what that price could be 1 month out, and eventually we'll project it up to 6 months out. So providers can plan for what they want to deploy in terms of capacity, and buyers can plan for when they make their next purchase.
That's exciting. Man, you got a lot going on, and this is, you're right. I feel like year over year, things are going to continue to grow. Things are going to move faster. And to me, it's just, I'm still a beneficiary in my business, still a beneficiary of just some of the more common things that I think a lot of businesses out there are, just workflows and just and productivity tools and just, things that make our lives easier. And I feel like as they go through, there's been a ripple effect in our organization of productivity in a good way. And it's actually allowed us, which is kind of, I always like to bring this up when I can, and I guess now is a good time to kind of fit it in, is it's actually allowed us to grow and to hire more. Like our workforce actually grew based off of the implementation of different tools that were, AI based because we picked up more business, we were more effective, we were more profitable, and we've been able to grow because of that. So contrary to, some of the things and maybe some other where, is it going to take jobs? Is it going to do this? Is it going to do that? So I'm excited. I'm excited to continue to see what, individuals like yourself doing the heavy lifting, right? that allows us to benefit from that on the downstream, we'll say.
Well, I would definitely say the team here is doing some heavy lifting, but if we want to be even more precise about it, the folks that are in those data centers racking and stacking those servers and chips and literally lifting these things that weigh hundreds to thousands of pounds, they're actually doing the heavy lifting, and people may never see them. But
pun intended. Come on, Simeon, you're a loud one. Come on, man.
Okay, fair enough.
I had to get it out of you. Oh, man, this is wonderful. Well, Simeon, this has really been great having you on the show. If somebody wants to follow up, if they want to learn more about Compute Exchange or follow your work or your journey, how do they do that?
It's one of 3 easy ways. They can email me. It's my first name, SIM as in Mike, EON as in Nancy, at tcex.com. That's my work email. On LinkedIn, or they can go to our website. It's compute.exchange.
Perfect.
But I appreciate the chance to be on your podcast.
Absolutely. And for everybody listening, just so you know, we'll definitely include the links in the show notes, so you can just click on the links and head right on over. And speaking of the audience, if this is your first time with Mission Matters and you haven't done it yet, hit that subscribe or follow button. This is a daily show. Each and every day we're bringing you new content, new ideas, and hopefully new inspiration to help you along the way in your journey as well. So again, hit that subscribe or follow button. And Simeon, thanks again for coming on the show.
Thank you, Adam.